Dale. Thanks for that introduction. My name's Chris. I'm one of the organisers here at Bitcoin Alive. Hope everyone's having a good time. We're just getting into the swing of things, so we've got a long day ahead of us, but thank you all for showing up. A little bit of background about me. I first got involved with Bitcoin many years ago in 2011, but I didn't really know what it was back then. Fast forward to about 2015, 2016, I started understanding it a little more. I picked up the white paper, started reading it, and that's kind of where the rabbit hole journey began for me. The first thing that I asked myself was, how do I get my Bitcoins off an exchange and into my own custody? And so that was the first problem I tried to solve. And any problem I like to solve, turns out that it's a problem found by other people, and I actually started a company called CoinStop. And CoinStop was the first hardware wallet reseller in Australia back in 2016, stocking hardware wallets like Ledgers, Trezors, Bitbox, all those brands. So I have a long history in custody and helping people get their Bitcoins into their own possession. So that sort of sets the table about where my background comes from. But let's hear from Pete and Andy a little bit about themselves, and then we'll get kicked off.
Hi, Andy, one of the partners at the Bitcoin Advisor. Pete and I met a little bit over a year ago, and Pete's been solving custody for his clients for a long time, and I'd been helping a lot of people move their self-managed superannuation into Bitcoin, and so had to work out how to help people custody that Bitcoin safely. Obviously, you don't want to leave it on the exchange, particularly when it's not your when it's your pension. And so Pete and I got to talking, and the Bitcoin Advisor was born, and both of our approaches to custody were fairly similar, but Pete's was kind of more advanced and sophisticated. And so a bit over a year ago, we launched the Bitcoin Advisor, and that's a global business out of the traps. And we've got advisors all over the world. We're about 30 advisors now, in excess of 200 clients, and growing very rapidly. Really helping clients just look after their Bitcoin and make sure there's no single point of failure. So, very privileged to work with Pete and the rest of the Bitcoin Advisor team, and help a lot of clients, really sleep easy at night and know that their Bitcoin's, no single points of failure. So,
myself, been in the space since 2016, helping clients buy and safely custody Bitcoin, and have the pleasure of working with Andy and Chris. Chris knows this, but most of you won't. But I've been probably a very long time supporter of Chris's business, CoinStop, and had the benefit of all of his good work in that, and is the premier hardware seller in the country. And as a twist of fate goes, fast forward, a number of years, we end up working together in solving this custody problem for clients together now, which I've got to say is an absolute treat to be working with you. And Chris won't say it, so I will, but there's no one better versed in the world, well, definitely in Australia, arguably the world, who has onboarded more people into self-custody than this man to the right of me. He has helped hundreds, if not thousands, of people get their coins off exchange, and has worked tirelessly over the last 10 years to make that happen. So might just embarrass Chris quickly and just get a quick round of applause for tireless work that he will not take any credit for and refuses to. But to me, this is where I think maybe we start the conversation, which is, as someone who hasn't had, well, the experience of taking coins off exchange, I can't think of someone with more experience than you to tell us about where that journey starts and what it looks like.
Yeah, sure. That was perfect segue, Pete. We haven't planned anything in this discussion because I'm just surrounded by two absolutely experts in the space, so I didn't feel like we needed to, but appreciate the compliments. There's still plenty more work to do, so head down, thumbs up. But yeah, let's wind it back a little bit and talk about some of, I guess, the early days of Bitcoin custody. So even, before I was around, still twiddling my fingers back in 2011, there really weren't hardware wallets. There really weren't places to store your Bitcoins. Other than maybe on thumb drives or USB sticks or on your own hard drive, or worse, you left it on the exchange. And we all know about the classic example of Mt. Gox collapsing and everyone's Bitcoins going missing in that event. And this happens on an almost weekly basis, where an exchange is hacked, or they get rug pulled, or they get over-regulated, and before you know it, the founder's dead somewhere in India and everyone's coins have gone. And that is actually a true story. Quadriga Exchange in Canada, that happened. So for anyone interested in looking up that story, that's all available on the internet. But there is a magnitudes of ways to lose your Bitcoins, which is sad. And that's why I guess we have jobs in startups, because we want to help people avoid those risks and mistakes. So from my perspective, back in the day, it was really difficult. And again, that's what started my journey into starting CoinStop and helping people go through that path as well. But maybe you guys want to touch a little bit on about the early days of Bitcoin custody. What were the options available in the marketplace? What did you have to do? What would the risks involve, etc.?
I don't think there were a lot of options available, and this is where the limits to not only the custody options were fairly limited, but the availability of allocating large amounts of capital to purchasing Bitcoin was very difficult. Back in 2016, when we first started doing this, I think Coinbase had a limit of $500 a week, and so there was a rate limiter on how much capital you could get in there. We think it's bad now where CBA limits that monthly deposit to $10,000. Well, Coinbase, the one who actually wanted to sell you the coins, limited to $500 a week. So I was fortunate that my brother ran an exchange in San Francisco and helped a lot of the exchanges out here so we could get whatever volume we wanted. But the custody options in the early days were absolutely terrifying. And to anyone who's not in tech and not willing to put time and effort and energy into it, it was very difficult to do. So you really only had one option, and this is where, in historical terms, Mt. Gox was an absolute behemoth. That thing blew up in circa 2013 and had 80% of the volume and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of coins on the exchange. And this is where, if you wanted to do it yourself and take that, there was just a complexity of technology that makes today's standards, which I still think is not an easy user experience, but it's infinitely better than where we are now. And this is where, it's fun watching this evolution where, I feel I wouldn't be capable to do the previous innovation or the first generation of the custody. And this is where the work you've done from 2016 onwards in getting people into the self-custody is really critical. But I might throw to Andy to talk about sort of where we are now, and then we can discuss what the future is.
Yeah, sure. I think it's really good to talk through the mechanics of what we're doing with clients and collaborative custody, so that you understand how it works and how we identify single points of failure and eliminate them. So when we're onboarding a client, when we're going through that early stage discussion with them, it's really a 2 of 3 multi-sig model. So obviously with single sig, if you've got a ledger, a Trezor, a cold card, a Jade, or whatever you have, you're taking your coins off the exchange, you're putting it on that device, you're writing down your seed phrase, you're keeping that somewhere safe, but you're a single point of failure. If you lose that device and seed phrase, you've lost your Bitcoin. Good luck. There's nobody you can appeal to say, I want my Bitcoin back. It's gone. So that makes you a single point of failure. Now, the next generation from there, if you do 2 of 3 multi-sig using something like Unchained, and you hold 2 of the 3 keys, you've improved things somewhat because you could lose one of your keys and seed phrase, but you would have the other one and Unchained's key, and therefore you could recover your funds by swapping one of the keys out. However, you're still one of the single points of failure because you could lose, if you can lose 1 key and seed phrase, you can easily lose 2 keys and 2 seed phrases. I can't tell you the amount of times I've talked to clients and they're like, I can't remember where I put my key, and I put the seed phrase somewhere safe, and I can't remember where I put it, or the device has got damaged, or it's bricked, or something's gone wrong, and so they have a problem. So it's just as easy to screw up 2 keys as it is to screw up 1 key. And so the next generation on from that is what we're doing with Unchained. We've been working closely with Unchained for over a year now. They've released functionality for us in the last few months, which allows the Bitcoin Advisor to share our Bitcoin Advisor key with Unchained clients over the platform. So the client holds a key, Unchained holds a key, and the Bitcoin Advisor holds a key. Only the client has access to the account using their username, password, and 2FA, and only the client has access to be able to generate spending transactions and request which keys they're going to use in order to sign those spending transactions. And so that eliminates all single points of failure. If the client loses their key and seed phrase, we still have the Unchained key and the Bitcoin Advisor key, so we can swap out the client's key for a new one and recover funds. If the Bitcoin Advisor ceases to exist, businesses disappear, then the client can log into their Unchained account using their key and Unchained's key, swap our key out, and recover funds. And if Unchained ever ceases to exist, companies go bust, do stupid things, then the client can work with us to swap out the Unchained key and recover funds. So there's no single point of failure. Clients cannot lose their Bitcoin. We also then, that enables a whole bunch of additional capabilities with clients. So once we've set up that structure, we can create what's called an estate plan protocol, which is a document that describes where the Bitcoin is, how it's secured, and most importantly, who to contact in the event that the Bitcoin is no longer around. So if you get knocked over by a bus, typically there is a real disparity in understanding between the Bitcoiner and their partner. Usually your wife or husband doesn't have half a clue about where the Bitcoin is or how it works or what on earth to do if we need to recover the Bitcoin. So that estate plan protocol covers that off. We often spend a lot of time with those partners when we're going through onboarding, really to prove to them that their Bitcoin partner isn't a lunatic and doing crazy stuff, and that there are other people that you can talk to about this stuff that makes sense, and it gives them somebody to talk to in order to help them recover funds should they need to. And we often find the result of those conversations are a tacit approval to buy more Bitcoin, because the partner is usually more comfortable that it's recoverable should it need to be. So that's kind of how it all fits together. The one question you will all ask me afterwards, so I'll address it now, is what's to stop Unchained and the Bitcoin Advisor colluding and taking your Bitcoin? So the way that our key is baked into their platform and the way that the Unchained key is baked into their platform, if a client or if somebody requests use of the Unchained key, it goes through a highly audited process, and only certain people in Unchained have access to their key. So it has to be very much proven that the client is requesting use of the key for that to happen. The Bitcoin Advisor cannot generate a spending transaction. Unchained cannot generate a spending transaction and request the other party to countersign. It all has to be initiated from the customer's account and the customer's side. And so that means that, it is physically and technically impossible for us to collude and make use of the Unchained key and the Bitcoin Advisor key without the client's knowledge. And I can demo that to anyone who's interested afterwards. And then fundamentally, the next logical question is, well, if I do get knocked over by a bus tomorrow, how does that work? And so we have a very structured, documented process that we go through, and we've taken a number of families through this over the years, where once you pass away, you go into a legal process called probate. You get assigned an executor of your estate. That executor acts as though they are you, with proof of death, notarized death certificate, notarized ID, notarized will, and using all of that legal documentation, we can work with either the executor of the estate and or Unchained to recover those funds and disperse them as per the wishes of the deceased estate. So that kind of logically pulls it all together, but I'll stop at that point.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andy and Pete. I think hopefully that gives a good overview of what the Bitcoin Advisor services offer. It's obviously not the only possible way to secure your Bitcoins in the marketplace. There is a magnitude of ways, and I think optionality is good for the consumer. So depending on where you are. And so the analogy I like to use is think of Bitcoin security as a spectrum. And at one end of the spectrum, you've got convenience. At the other end of the spectrum, you've got security. And so you need to determine where you position yourself along that spectrum. What solution works for me may not work for you, may not work for the next person. And so if you want convenience, leave your Bitcoin on the exchange. There's nothing more convenient than that, right? They give you a username, they give you a password, and you log in and it's all there. But what you are trading off for that is a huge amount of security risk, counterparty risk, loss of funds. For me, it's unacceptable. So I would never position myself on that end of the spectrum, because I cannot live with that. That's the reason why I'm in Bitcoin, is to hold my own keys, to be outside of any system, to be uncontrollable in that sense. Leaving your coins on the exchange, we know, like I said earlier, on a weekly basis, we have exchange hacks happening. So too much of a risk. So I say, okay, let's move a little bit further along the scale. Where do we find ourselves now? Okay, maybe we're using a hot wallet on our phone or on our desktop. It's a good step. It means now that they can't get access to your Bitcoins. You take it from the exchange, you put it on your mobile phone or on your computer. There we go. We've solved one problem. However, computers are connected to the internet, and computers are very easy to hack. And there are hackers out there, maybe even hackers in this room, who are smart enough to be able to extract your Bitcoin from those soft wallets and from those hot wallets. So again, for me personally, I think that's an unacceptable risk to take. That's 100% loss of funds. So I move myself to the next notch on the spectrum. And for me, that would be something like a hardware wallet, using a Ledger, using a Trezor. I'm sure, show of hands, who's using a hardware wallet in the room? there's a good percentage, and I'm incredibly glad to see that. But with that comes risks as well. As Andy was pointing out, there's a single point of failure. If something happens to you, if something happens to your recovery phrase or your hardware device, and you don't have the adequate backups or the adequate training for your beneficiaries or whoever that might be, that's 100% loss of Bitcoin. So again, you need to determine where you position yourself on the spectrum. If we went all the way to the other end of the spectrum, maybe we would have 24 words, 24 seed phrase words in 24 different countries dug in 24 different holes. That's incredibly secure. Like, I don't know if anyone's going to be able to hack that. You would need a coordinated attack across, multiple continents. But, if I lost my wallet or it became malfunctioned, I'd have to jump on a plane and drive or fly to 24 different countries. I certainly don't have that much Bitcoin to worry about that. So I bring myself back away from that end of the spectrum. And so, the Bitcoin Advisor, Unchained, hardware wallets, all of these are options. Some are better than others. Some protect from different risks compared to others. I think, without being biased, of course, as an advisor myself, and also someone who has a rich history of single seed storage, Pete came up to me and said, "Look, here's what I've been doing for the last 7 years. I want you to look at it, and I want you to break the model." And he gave it to me, and it's actually given away to everyone. If you go to the Bitcoin Advisor website, it's got a comparison table of everything that they offer. That is the blueprint in what they think is the gold standard of storage for this type of person who's worried about single points of failure, death, the long-term value of their Bitcoin if it needs to be passed on to different generations. So yeah, maybe let's expand a little bit more on some of those risks that the Bitcoin Advisor mitigates against, and perhaps some of the shortfalls in that type of model as well. What are the trade-offs? Surely there's a catch, right?
Yeah, I think the way I generally describe it, as Chris says, there's no perfect solution in Bitcoin custody, only trade-offs, and it's about finding the right balance of those trade-offs between security and convenience and recoverability and everything else. So really the trade-off that we have in the setup that we talk about, as far as a client is concerned, the trade-off they have is that they have to request a counter-signature in order to spend their Bitcoin. Now, we don't consider that a significant impediment because we're talking about long-term cold storage of Bitcoin, and you're not moving it very often, and you're not spending it very often. It's generally the bank vault that you're keeping the bulk of your wealth in. Now, you can move funds in and out at will whenever you like, and it's a very minor inconvenience to do a spending transaction, and it takes as long as it takes either Unchained or us to respond to the request to move funds, and that's the trade-off. But we think that's a minor trade-off relative to the convenience benefits you get, the recoverability benefits that you get. Obviously, the other final trade-off is we charge a fee. And we charge a fee for that service, and in a large proportion of circumstances, that's a tax deduction anyway. So relatively minor downside to having to pay a fee, but obviously, that works well for a lot of clients because you've got 99% upside for 1% fee, and without the 100% downside of potential catastrophic loss. So we think that's good value for money. We obviously provide a broader range of services wrapped around everything that we do with our clients. They have access to some of the best Bitcoiners in the world, and get a chance to talk to Peter about asset allocation and strategies for maximizing the amount of Bitcoin. And so we spend a lot of time with clients on those sorts of things too. So like I say, there's no perfect solution, only trade-offs. But if we can find the best balance of trade-offs, we think we have, it works well for a lot of people.
Further to that, I think, we're all in this room today, and the fact that we're all here at this point in time tells me that we've all done an immense amount of work around this. The resources we have online and are available, we want to help everyone improve their own self custody. And a personal motto of mine is "You do you." If you're here in this room today, chances are you're already self custodying your Bitcoin. There are a stack of ideas and things that we talk about there that will hopefully level up your own self custody. And this is where dealing with some experiences on a client level. Um, Over the years, we've taken clients with zero experience in Bitcoin and gotten them into self custody in a matter of hours. And this is where collaborative custody may not be for everyone, but it's a good idea multi-sig to sort of start thinking about how it can help with the recovery for Bitcoin. Because as an investment advisor with a fiduciary duty to clients, the last thing I wanted to do was set clients up in a self custody, let them walk out the door with one key, and then turn around to me in a month's time and say, "Hey, I've lost that key and I don't have those words. Can we get my Bitcoin back? And to me, that represents an unacceptable level of risk for anyone to take. And this is where, in time, and sort of a story I share well, quite often, is we've had sadly 3 clients pass now, and we've been able to safely transition their clients' Bitcoin from themselves, or from them who have passed to the next generation, the executor, or alternatively the beneficiaries, by using that collaborative custody arrangement. And this is what becomes really powerful, that you know we all start out in Bitcoin, not your keys, not your coins, and we might be young or we might be inexperienced, and then what I find happens is Bitcoin becomes either a meaningful part of your self worth, or net worth, I should say. And all of a sudden, there's a huge amount of your wealth tied up to this asset that you have full control over, that you might not have the ability to pass on to others upon your death. Or alternatively, you move through a stage of life where you're now responsible for people, such as a wife or children, and being able to say, "Hey, I'm happy to make a contribution to the network on my death," isn't acceptable anymore, because you now have a wife and child who you would like to see.
The rest of us would be thankful of it, but yes, your hard work is lost by not being able to prepare for that next generation, right?
Exactly, and this is where having that conversation, and urging you to go out and actually write down on a piece of paper, um, and whoever you're leaving it to, or your loved one, say, "Hey, can you access or move my Bitcoins?" Give them a piece of paper. If they're not able to do that, then there are some serious questions around your own self-custody setup. And this is where I personally think having multiple redundancies and multiple fail safes in place, at the trade-off of I've got to get one of a professional services to co-sign a transaction to me, is an acceptable trade-off. And this is sadly where we're at in Bitcoin, that there's no solutions, only trade-offs. Um, I just share with everyone what has been, 8 years worth of experience in this space working on it. And um, this is where I'm, sharing some other stories with you. I've had clients who I thought were exceptionally organized, to the point of being OCD, who we set up a multi-sig arrangement for. Um, they walked out the door very happy with what was done, and within a month were back to me to say, "Oh, Peter, I've got a bit of a problem." I'm like, "You shouldn't. What's the problem?" "Oh, I've lost my hardware device." And I'm like, "No problem. You've got your seed words right. You've got your seed words right." And no, well, we don't have that either. And I was like, "Okay." And they're like, "Have we lost our Bitcoin?" And I'm talking millions of dollars in Bitcoin that would have been lost if we were setting them up with a single sig and saying, "Now, that 24 words, be really careful, don't lose it." And to me, having seen people who I thought were exceptionally organized just have a bad moment, that would have cost millions of dollars, and that number's a lot more now in in nominal terms. Um, it just makes sense to me to have those fail safes in place. And this is where I urge you to assess your own situation and improve your own self custody by putting in place fail safes for all of those redundancies that come in play, because we just don't know what's around the corner.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess what I'm hearing here is like it's a journey. It's, we talked about what it was like 10 years ago, where you had USB sticks and hard drives and leaving them on exchange. You probably heard the story about the guy that lost a hard drive with 10,000 Bitcoin. It got sent to the tip, and now he's been trying to broker a deal with the person that owns the tip to be able to go in there and search for that hardware device, knowing that there's 10,000 Bitcoin on there. I haven't heard an update on that story, but that's a lesson, right? Like that's where we were 10 years ago. We move forward to 2013, 2014. We start to see hardware wallets come into the space, and that's where we were for a number of years. And like I said, I've sold probably more than anyone in this country a hardware wallet, and I'm seeing that dry up. And I think this is perhaps the next evolution of custody, certainly for people at different journeys of their Bitcoin path. Maybe you've just bought $500 worth of Bitcoin, probably not worth going to a multi-sig collaborative custody model. But will that $500 of Bitcoin either increase in value naturally as time goes on, or maybe you'll add to that stack as your conviction and confidence grows? And so again, you need to move yourself to the appropriate part of the spectrum where you feel most comfortable. And so I'll reiterate, there are no perfect solutions, only trade-offs. You need to find out what that perfect solution is for you, because it may not be the same solution for the next person. And so as you progress along that journey, you need to be at the forefront of that. And a lot of us have real lives. I mean, we probably don't, but a lot of us have families, real lives, jobs to go to. It's a full-time job almost thinking about your Bitcoin security. And what we know with Bitcoin is you must take personal responsibility. And for a lot of people, that's a rewiring of the brain, because we've come from traditional finance where that's all been handed off to someone. The bank handles that, PayPal handles that, Visa handles that. No worries. If I get scammed, I call them up, they give me my money back. That doesn't work in Bitcoin. You need to take this stuff seriously, not to drive too much fear into people, but it is a journey. And as you become more confident and start to allocate more seriously, these questions will pop up. And so they should. And so there is a wealth of knowledge on this stage and in the room and around in Australia of people who are willing to help you, because we've all gone down that path and we've all made those mistakes. I'm sure everyone here on this stage has probably lost Bitcoin at some point during their life. And, as it gets more valuable, you want to try to avoid that as much as possible. So we'll try to get to some questions at the end if we've got a bit of time. But what I want to sort of move into now is, what do we foresee the future of Bitcoin custody? That is the name of the panel. We've given the evolution up until this point. What do we think might be the future of Bitcoin custody? I mean, we're kind of looking into a magic 8 ball here. We may not have the answers, but do you guys have any thoughts on that?
I think that's your favorite topic, Pete.
That's true. It is. I'm really hopeful about what the future of self custody looks like. I think um, I have the good fortune of working with a whole host of companies in the space to bring new products to market, and I think particularly in the multi-sig or collaborative custody space, and most importantly, some of the programmable multi-sigs that are going to come to fruition. They are in and around and ready, not ready, but they're sort of in testing phase at the moment. I think in the bear market in 2 years' time, they will absolutely start getting some traction, and then they'll be ready for prime time in sort of 4 years' time. But what do I mean by what am I seeing when it comes to collaborative custody for me, or even self custody, which I think will be some of the most important things that come to market? First is a better user experience, and I think for anyone who's interested, arguably the easiest multi-sig experience on the planet right now is Thea. And I'll just spell that out in case anyone wants to download it, which is THEYA. And I'd urge you to play around with it. Like, it is an exceptional user experience relative to where we are with everything else at the moment. So I think we're going to get an absolute upgrade in terms of user experience. Then in creating greater security, I think there's a number of things that are going to come into place, which I find really exciting because it's going to improve everyone's self-custody. And that is having a programmable multi-sig. And by that, I mean, we're going to be able to have, say in the instance of what we do, we're going to be able to have the client's key as the master key in the multi-sig quorum. So unless that master key is signing a transaction, then nothing can move from that account. And this is where, for me, that provides cryptographic proof that there is no form of collusion available. Which,
What about if that key's lost? So in an accident where unfortunately someone passes away, or the dog eats the hardware wallet or whatever, what happens if in that type of scenario you're painting where it's the master key, it must be used? What if it can't be used? Is that Bitcoin lost?
great question. And no, and this is where you can program in the master key, but then you can program in timing of it to degrade to a traditional 2 of 3 multi-sig. So the client has full control and full capacity to sign any transaction, and nothing can move without that. However, it will degrade to, if they lose their key for whatever reason, you might have a 3-month or a 6-month or a 12-month, or you might find Tarzan of the jungle who says, no, I want a 10-year time lag on that. Then you can have that traditional wallet with the master key degrade to a standard 2 of 3 in a time period that you allocate. So I would probably suggest a 6-month period is a traditional lockup. And then the other thing that you can program into this, and this is one thing I'm excited to see come to fruition, but having the ability to time lock that in the multi-sig quorum. So all things that are coming, but they're just not here yet. But for me, that's what makes me really hopeful about the fact that each and every one of us will be able to self-custody with multiple fail-safes, multiple redundancies, and effectively a backdoor hack for recovery. So.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Now, obviously, a lot of this stuff is still very experimental and new, and the nerds are working it out. And that's what we've seen with Bitcoin custody evolution over time. Is the developers and the entrepreneurs are at the forefront of that, and as the user experience and the UIs get better, then it becomes to start to realize to the consumer market. And so again, hardware wallets were only used by nerds back in 2013, 2014. As of today, we saw before, most people in the room have now familiarized themselves with these devices, and so as that time goes on, it gets better, it gets easier. Andy, do you have anything else to wrap us up? I'm not sure how our time's going. I think we're getting fairly close. We've got 5 minutes. Okay, fantastic.
I just want to say that Pete's far too humble to say it, but a lot of these innovations are driven from Pete's real world experiences of helping clients with their Bitcoin. He spends a lot of time talking to the likes of Thea and other companies, Unchained for that matter, who we're working with. And these companies are building out this functionality because Pete's bringing real world experience to it of helping clients manage their funds and look after it. So if anyone deserves a round of applause, it's Pete for moving the industry forward. And they'll hate me for making you do that.
I pay Andy a lot of money to say those things. So, on a serious note, I think we've got a lot to look forward to, and the often the greatest criticism of self custody is that it's too difficult, it's too hard. And you know what? If you buy Bitcoin and you look at it and you think, okay, well, you know what? It may be too hard, it may be too difficult, and all the rest of it. But if we start thinking that in the very near future we're going to have the price rep 10, 20, 100, and I think more 100x from here, all of a sudden, whatever you're holding is going to look like an enormous amount of your wealth, and it's worthwhile spending the time and energy on. And to me, when it comes to being a Bitcoiner, there's nothing more important than the security of your Bitcoin and the recoverability of it. So it may be worthwhile if you've got a bit to spend a little bit of time on it, learning and making sure you protect it, because I firmly believe that it'll be an intergenerational asset that you'll be able to pass down for the next 1,000 years, and your loved ones in the future will love you and probably hate you for it too. So,
Yeah, you're right. Bitcoin certainly forces you to lower your time preference as you go down that path, and to the point where I don't even check the price anymore. And those that know anything about me, not that I'm famous in any regard, but yeah, I've just gotten to the point now where the price is an irrelevant metric to me. And so I'm thinking multi-generational. I'm thinking about my kids' kids, because that's the level of conviction I have about Bitcoin. And so a single seed storage on a hardware wallet I bought 6 years ago isn't probably going to cut it when it comes to making sure my grandkids are well looked after, and their Bitcoin is still within the family hair. So that, I think, wraps up the main of it. But we've got some time for some questions. So if anyone's got some questions, stick your hand up. Dale will come around and we'll try answer as many.
The mics.
Okay.
This?
Yep.
Okay. All right. We'll start here. Curious how you guys think about at some point a nation state makes it illegal for individuals to own Bitcoin in this solution, and or corporations or whatever. How does that change? And this on your own hardware wallet, you have some protection as a bearer asset, but now you may have some liabilities, especially I don't know where Unchained is incorporated, Bitcoin Advisor, if it's coordinated.
Sure, it's a great question. And
Good question.
it probably offers additional benefits because there's jurisdictional arbitrage. So with Unchained incorporated in Austin, Texas, us being in Sydney, Australia, and clients being wherever they may be in the world, a coordinated attack across multiple legal jurisdictions is complicated and takes time and is difficult, and gives you plenty of opportunity to move your funds out of arm's reach. So, all of these things are trade-offs, right? And if the government where you live come after you with your single sig and decide to, take your Bitcoin, then it's going to be tough. But if your Bitcoin is in multi-sig collaborative custody across multiple keys with multiple jurisdictions, then it is much harder to come after your Bitcoin. We also have a very useful clause in our contract that was kindly given to us by a rather prominent lawyer in the US, which is the duress clause, that basically states that if you as a client are under duress, whether that's legal or physical, that we do not have to comply with the signature. And that's a real fail-safe for clients to be able to comply entirely with whatever the court may be asking them to do, so that they aren't in contempt of court denying to do something, but we don't have to comply because of that duress clause, and therefore it protects them certainly for long enough to turn any discussion into a negotiation rather than a demand. And ultimately, that's what legal challenges end up in, is negotiation. Most things settle. Most things don't end up in prosecution. So certainly with this sort of thing, we think you end up in a much stronger legal position than you would perhaps if you were in just single sig storage where you had your own key.
I think we might have time for perhaps one more
One more
question.
question, yeah.
Oh, look at that. Everyone's so nice.
So, I suppose firstly for me, Pete, heard you on a podcast, I think it was earlier this week. Big fan of the thermodynamics and a triple point asset. Just want to put that out there. I suppose an echo to what old mate down the front asked, how does the Bitcoin advisor approach things like, particularly under duress, enduring power of attorney, existing power of attorney, particularly from an Australasian standpoint? And do you see, I suppose, the evolution of that and the asset class changing in sort of the next 20 years?
That's a big question that merges both the legal and the cryptography with what we've got. I'll say that we apply New South Wales legislation or law to what we do because we're under New South Wales jurisdiction. Depending on what countries we're working with, we're happy to work with whatever is required there. One other thing in our contracts is, say, in the state of an enduring power of attorney where there's a loss, we need to verify with the client in some capacity or legal capacity. So we need sign off from a or notarized authority to confirm that such is the case. And then this is where, for me, moving forward, the innovations that are coming, I think, are going to alleviate all of our concerns around this and solve a host of problems that we don't even know are available yet. So for me, I'm really hopeful about what's coming down the pipe. I think within 4 years we'll see that dramatically shift, and what we see today is going to change dramatically. And this is what I'm looking forward to. So,
Well, I think we've run out of time, so let's give a round of applause to the two great gentlemen, Peter and Andy, and thank you very much for being here today.